We're now going to analyze the inverse cosine function. We start by looking at a graph, and we notice the graph of y equals cosine of x is not 1 to 1. So again, what we need to do is restrict the domain of y equals cosine of x in order to make it 1 to 1. A logical restriction is to restrict the angle x so that x is between 0 and pi inclusive. So the domain of the cosine function is going to be 0 to pi inclusive. Its range will be -1 to 1 inclusive. What that means, therefore, is that for the inverse cosine of x, we're going to have a domain of -1 to 1, because that was the range of y equals cosine of x, and we're going to have a range of 0 to pi inclusive, because that was our restricted domain on y equals cosine of x. Again, we're reminded of the fact that when you have an inverse in a function, it is the case that f inverse of f of x equals x for all x in the domain of f. Therefore, the arc cosine of the cosine of x will equal x, where x must be between 0 and pi inclusive. And likewise, the cosine of the arc cosine of x must equal x, but here x is between -1 and 1 inclusive, because the inside function, if you will, is the arc cosine function. So here are the characteristics of y equals the arc cosine or inverse cosine of x. The domain of the arc cosine of x is the same as the range of y equals the cosine of x. That is, the domain is all real numbers between -1 and 1. The range of y equals the arc cosine of x is going to be the same as the domain of y equals the cosine of x. That is, it's going to be all real numbers between 0 and pi inclusive. We obtain the graph of y equals arc cosine of x by reflecting the graph of y cosine of x about the line y equals x. So now let's go ahead and do an example. We're asked to evaluate the arc cosine of 0, or the inverse cosine of 0. That is, some angle theta has an inverse cosine of 0. Another way of thinking about this is the cosine of what angle equals 0, bearing in mind that the angle theta must be between 0 and pi inclusive in order for the cosine function to be 1 to 1. So the cosine of what angle is 0. If you think about it long enough, you should get that theta is equal to pi over 2, because the cosine of pi over 2 is 0. Therefore, the inverse cosine of 0 is equal to pi over 2.